welcome to the Terminal Velocity Podcast, issue number 2. I'm Scott.
I'm Andrew.
And on this week's episode, we're going to get into the regular comics details that we talked about the last time. We're going to cover off some All Points Bulletin, some of the important news stories that we have opinions on. We're going to get into Tapping the Speed Force, where we talk about Doomsday Clock and kind of what our feelings are on it and how well it lives up to Watchmen.
But we're also going to hit HyperTiming and a little brief running the Cosmic Treadmill. It won't be a full segment this week, but it will have something we want to touch on.
To round out the episode, we're going to finish off with our pick of the weeks, which were not as easy as it was last week.
It was a pretty rough week. Not rough. They weren't bad stories, but they weren't great either.
Yeah, nothing jumped out to me this week in the same way that something jumped out to me last week. So
we're gonna try and tackle that.
We're gonna try and get into that one.
And then I think we'll finally answer the question that you've surely been waiting to hear. The I don't get it segment. Why is Iron Man so popular?
Yes, we'll see if we can answer that mysterious question.
Okay. It's a tough one.
So let's kick off with our All Points Bulletin. So the first news story that I want to cover is regarding the Green Lantern wishing ring story that was running across a few of the different websites. I saw this one on Newsarama, where Morrison really got into digging into what the Green Lantern ring is all about. It has always been the most powerful weapon in the universe.
You mean it's not just meant for green boxing gloves and cages?
It's not just meant for blasting amorphous green blobs at things and throwing a punching glove into somebody's face randomly or just covering them in a bubble. It goes back to a lot of the roots of the Alan Scott Green Lantern, where despite it being, having its weakness to wood, it actually was able to shrink things, and he was able to pass through walls.
So he could be beaten by a crucifix.
He could be beaten by a crucifix. He could be beaten by a stick. A small child in the park with a stick could just trounce
Galaxy's greatest weapon. Useless.
Useless. In a thunderstorm with a lot of wind.
He couldn't stop a hurricane then.
No, he was basically sidelined at Christmas because it was just
too many Christmas trees.
There's too much going on. But I thought that was really interesting because
rest in peace, Alan Scott.
It got into it made a lot more sense when I first started reading it, and just the headline, as it was meant to do, pulled me in and thought, okay, what crap is this that we're going to be getting now? A wishing ring, please. But that was just
it does sound kind of ridiculous.
It sounds completely ridiculous.
But you're right. Like it totally is plausible if it's the strongest weapon in the universe, powered by your willpower. You would think you could do more than just constructs.
Yeah, thought and will is all it needs in order to, bring whatever's in your mind to life. So I thought that was really, really cool.
I guess it doesn't make for good comic panels though, when you can't draw a green invisible person or I guess it's more dynamic to have the green constructs, but it does make sense to have new abilities, or at least latent abilities. And we know that the Guardians are dicks, so they may have limited the Lantern Corps, at least narratively.
Yeah, so all that said, I'm really looking forward to what he comes up with the first volume of his run, and I think this is I wasn't really clear on whether this is going to come to fruition in his first story arc, or if it's going to be in the kind of second run that he's going to be doing. But I'm
pretty excited for it. I think that Green Lantern has needed a kick in the butt for a little while now. I like that it's going to focus on one of Earth's lanterns. The other ones don't have to die or anything gruesome like that, but I do like the idea of it going back to there being kind of one. It certainly won't go back to the heyday of Kyle Rayner, where it was just one, but at least it'll be these individual stories.
Yeah, and the further away they can get from the different spectrum, the better. I'm not really keen on all of that stuff. I didn't read
Neither am I.
I didn't read those stories when they were out, and because I found it just too convoluted. I get the reasons behind it. It's just not something I'm interested in.
I wonder what the fuchsia core is.
I don't even know what fuchsia is.
Another mystery to be revealed later.
Yeah.
By Jeff Johns.
So somebody else that's coming back that I'm really excited about.
This
And
one's a good one.
as soon as I saw this one, I went and I did a Google search for the Secret Origins trade that I used to have. I can't find it in my collection right now. The Secret Origins trade, because the Martian Manhunter is getting a new book, both as both incarnations of John Jones, and it's taking him back to his detective roots.
Guest starring Batman. Just kidding. Unfortunately, it is only a 12-issue limited series, but I'm hoping that he kind of gains enough sales so we can see an ongoing. I think Martian Manhunter's been painfully neglected, so this is pretty exciting.
Yeah, and they've brought him back into the Justice League finally after Morrison's fantastic use of him through the JLA stuff. He was a massive figure in the Justice League Unlimited animated series, which I think just about anybody that was a comics fan watched that, because it was just your Justice League.
What's pretty cool is and he also appears in was it Young Justice or yeah, Young Justice, and one of my nephews actually was looking for a John Jones action figure, which is mostly non-existent at the moment. So I grabbed one of my old DC collectibles to give to him, but kids are interested, so I'm hoping that there is a good chance that this could lead to something ongoing.
Mm-hmm. And I like that it's going to be him as the detective figuring some things
It's
out.
a pretty cool element to bring back.
It really is, because that was his major roots. He came to Earth and then he turned into the detective, and he's got that aspect, and he's always got the powers similar-esque with the strength and everything, and flight to Superman. But he's got the Batman, dark and brooding.
I'm sure his psychic powers don't hurt either.
Psychic, yeah, that's always his.
Hey, they should have a Justice League Task Force book come up, and it'll be starring Martian Manhunter, Batman, and Flash, and they can form like a little squad. They can, conduct the crime scene investigation, get to the root of the assailant or the killer, and then John can do the interrogation. Done. Perfect task force.
Done. Yeah, Marvel has its science bros. DC can have its detective bros.
Yeah, detective bros.
I think that would
Justice League Task Force coming 2019.
Okay.
The next all points bulletin that we have here, Franklin Richards' power levels have kind of been redefined in the latest issue of Fantastic Four #2, Legacy number 647. Spoilers for anyone who hasn't read this issue yet. It did come out this week, but we figured we should touch on it.
Yeah, actually, we should fire off a huge spoiler warning. Obviously, I didn't cover this at the beginning. This is a comics show, so we are going to spoil anything that came out this week.
So, if you're still listening, hopefully. Basically, Franklin has always kind of been like an undefined, like supremely powerful character. If you remember, he created the Heroes Reborn universe that spared the lives of pretty much all the core Marvel characters during the Onslaught storyline. He's now kind of described as being able to create multiple parallel worlds. However, he in the latest issue does reach kind of a maximum point. So there's a defined number of universes he's able to create within his power limits. But he is described as being more powerful than Thor, Silver Surfer, and the Hulk combined, I presume. Sounds like an episode of Family Guy there. But he potentially loses parts of his abilities having created the other universes. It's kind of undefined at the moment in that regard, but it's do you have anything to add to that there, Scott?
Yeah, when I was reading this issue, it was interesting because they actually make a point of saying it like 3 or 4 times. He's still an Omega level mutant. I think he's one of the very few Omega levels within the Marvel construct. That he's still at that level, but the Molecule Man makes a point of saying, this part of his journey is done, whatever that means. Now,
yeah, like
this is comics, so it's done as far as this storyline needs to be.
Do you think they're redefining him as whether or not he's actually a mutant? Like, I know he's previously been classified as a mutant, like any other, but do you think he's being kind of elevated to like a different class of being with this?
Like a cosmic level?
Yeah, like thing? I know, because his powers originate from a cosmic source, right? So, like, I'm wondering if they're kind of reclassifying him in that way.
I don't know. I mean, they could be. It might be something that they're going for. I would hope not, because it's the one thing that ties the Fantastic Four in with
the rest of the Marvel universe.
A lot of the rest of the Marvel universe, and gives them like why Leech is there and all of those things. It gives them that X-Men component.
That's true.
That comes through. So I would hope they don't get rid of that. And given all of the work that went into Hickman's run, where Franklin could still do some pretty amazing things, I can't see this being a lasting effect that they make in.
Well, who knows with Dan Slott? Maybe Reed and Sue will make a deal with Mephisto or some other character where they need to sacrifice their marriage to save the day.
Could happen.
Sorry, wrong title.
You're just really wanting to get into that section of the podcast. You have lots of opinions on what goes on.
Mephisto's an amazing character. Another story that caught our eyes here today is the unfolding Superman drama for the worlds of DC. Apparently, Henry Cavill is out. Some are saying he's not. Some are saying it's fake. Nobody knows anything.
He's posting really weird videos where he's got dogs barking in the background showing a Superman figure.
And he looks like he's about to cry. And yeah, that's really weird. And all this talk of Supergirl now being the front and center of the worlds of DC, which is a little odd to me, but we can get into that in another topic, I guess. But I by no means I'm a huge Supergirl fan, so
yeah, it's just more of they've spent a lot of time trying to build him up to be the cornerstone and the launching pad, to then just decide, okay, something's not working, so we'll get rid of that.
Well, maybe he's going to star with Ben Affleck in Batman v Superman 2, The End of Justice.
I'm of like two opinions on this whole thing. One, nothing is confirmed, so who cares?
Yeah.
Right now, DC doesn't really have any strong movies that are coming out right now. I mean, there's Aquaman.
What about Shazam?
Yeah, the kids really want to see that, so I will go to the theater to see it. It's not one that I'm necessarily looking forward to, but there's that whole part of it where it's not confirmed, and then there's maybe it would work better on a TV show to help bolster some of that stuff up first. We have some of these other competing characters already.
Was it Tyler Hoechlin or Hoechlin? I can't remember how you pronounce his name, but he's the TV's Arrowverse's Superman, who's kind of vanished. I mean, I haven't really followed as closely this last couple seasons, but from what I can tell, he hasn't really returned since the Supergirl storyline he was in.
Yeah, I didn't see him. I haven't watched the last season, but after Kara beating the hell out of him, he kind of handed over the reins as "You are Earth's mightiest protector" type of thing.
Oh, okay. So then, yeah, he's like,
so
I'm gonna go to the Phantom Zone. Bye. But I guess they've cast Lois Lane as well now. The name slips my memory, but the people are kind of hinting at the idea that there might be a Superman show in the works because of this drama. Superman's kind of sidelined in the movie universe, and now they're kind of filling out the Superman world. So there's that speculation that there could be a Superman TV show, which frankly I'm all for. I've always liked Superman on TV.
I think it could work. Elizabeth, I'll pronounce it wrong, Elizabeth Tulloch.
From Grimm, right?
Yeah, from Grimm is apparently going to be the Arrow versus Lois Lane. Like I say, the Arrowverse has got some great things going on for it. They're going to be bringing in Batwoman now. We've got Supergirl already there. We've got Superman already there. We've got the Flash, which I think is its absolute
Why isn't Black Lightning getting any love here? Like, why can't he come and join the... I know he's in a different universe, but so is Supergirl, right?
He's on the Netflix Earth universe.
Oh.
So I don't know how that ties in. I watched Black Lightning. I thought it was a great show.
I'm pretty sure it's a Greg Berlanti production too.
I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah. So
it's unfortunate.
I don't know why it's not.
Maybe he'll be a surprise guest.
Maybe he'll be lucky enough to land on the Legends show.
He can join John Constantine and Firestorm or something.
Yeah, whatever's going on.
Whoever's in there.
Which is, not to be disparaging, it's the one show that I was never really keen on. I don't think it landed quite the way it should have. But anyway. Moving on to things that haven't quite landed though.
There's a couple different quick points we want to make before we move on to the next segment. I'm gonna list the 3 remaining stories we kind of mentioned here, and then we'll talk quickly about what we want to. The original X-Force team is reestablishing itself in the wake of Extermination number 1. Mm-hmm. Yeah, number 1. So spoilers again, guys. So they want to get together to investigate the death of the original Cable at the hands of younger Cable. Yeah. So yeah, that's a thing. Nightwing, we talked about last week. Well, now apparently Scott Lobdell's in. Ben Percy's out rather mysteriously. After issue 50, I think it is, he's writing number 50, and then he's no longer on the book. Scott Lobdell, best known for Generation X, he's coming on board. Mm-hmm. He's supposedly taking over the Nightwing and Crisis storyline here, but we don't know at this point what scale that story is going to play going forward.
Yeah, that one's really like the 2 of these storylines I'm interested in. The original X-Force going after younger Cable for killing older Cable. Some of them want him to answer for it. Some want to kill him because of it. Some of them just want to figure it out. Like I say, this whole extermination thing has got me well back into the X-Men.
Yeah, it's zany X-Men at its best. The best in years that I can tell.
Yeah, just continuity thrown against the wall and just letting it splatter and just going mental with whatever you've got. So
I've never been a huge X-Force fan, even though I'm a Cable fan. So I'm not sure I'm going to pick up this book, but I'm curious if this is where they're going to flesh out the new direction for Cable.
I'll pick up the book because it's written by the same guy that's doing the Extermination storyline. So Ed Bryson. So I'll check that out. It's being drawn by Dylan Burnett, who was the guy that's doing the Cosmic Ghost Rider right now. Yeah. So, and we all know my feelings from that last week. So I'm on board for this one. The Nightwing creative thing was another one of these cryptic, I'm off the book as a 50, but you're in good hands. I'm just upset I didn't get to tell the story I wanted to. And now Lobdell's writing it, which the way comics should work is, like, is he going back to tweak existing scripts, or is he completely rewriting 51 through 53?
I would say maybe he's doing it the Marvel way, where the panels exist already, I would assume at this point, and he is kind of writing around the story. But who knows? Like, it's a weird change, especially because they were promoting this new direction just recently. So maybe there's been fan backlash. I wasn't a huge fan.
This is your fault.
Yes, I personally am responsible for this change. Sorry, Ben Percy. I'm guessing that. Maybe, like, because he did mention in his tweets that he isn't getting to tell the story that he wanted to tell, so I'm guessing that editorial wasn't happy with the direction that he was planning to take it. And, looking at the solicits, I can't say that I disagree. All the best to him. I think the Russo brothers just bought his, like, spec script or something, so he's going to do just fine.
Yeah, okay. Good for him.
One last story I want to mention, Scott here doesn't really care, but it's Otto Octavius is going to return as the Superior Spider-Man in a new ongoing series following the Superior Octopus one-shot.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I don't care. I have feelings. I just don't think they're the right ones for this. I was a fan of when Superior Spider-Man came out. I thought it was an interesting take on it and a way to kind of tell something different. I didn't want Peter Parker gone. I didn't want Otto Octavius to be Spider-Man, but I thought it was interesting, and then things went off the rails.
It's very much true. It's kind of like Clone Saga, where it started off promising and then kind of just ran just a little too long. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I wasn't ever a huge fan of Superior Spider-Man. I was kind of, I liked it as like a storyline, mm-hmm. like like a one arc kind of thing. That then became a annual, or I think it lasted 2 years. I think
2 years. Yeah, it would have worked a lot better if it had just been.
I'm kind of hoping that this, by the end of whatever this run is, that Otto Octavius is kind of restored, like in an Otto Octavius body. Like I find it kind of weird that he's now this kind of half Spider-Man clone, half Octavius thing. it's one of those changes that I think they have to address down the line. I don't think it works indefinitely.
No, I don't like it in terms of losing one of his better villains.
Yeah.
Like, we're having him fight a whole bunch of different...
Well, they could bring back Seaward Trainer's daughter, the second Dr. Octopus, from the Clone Wars. Or Clone Wars. From the Clone Saga.
Fine. Do something like that. Like, I don't see a point in taking one of the heavy-hitting villains and then, again, changing him back to what he was all those years ago, because it doesn't make sense.
I wonder how Nick Spencer feels about this.
I'll be curious to see if that even pops up in his book.
Yeah. Well, I think that's good for All Points Bulletin. Moving on, I think we're going to start tapping the Speed Force today.
Okay. Tapping the Speed Force, tackling Doomsday Clock.
All right. Go ahead.
I'm up first. I'm actually enjoying this book a lot. I know a lot of people aren't keen on having the Watchmen come into the main DC universe.
I'd be one of them.
And but I am actually enjoying it. I think it's an interesting read. It's going a lot slower than I'd maybe like it to. I like having little twists of the comedian coming back, that really throwing off Ozymandias and him being completely floored that he's come back. Like, that caught him off guard.
Well, like in
nice
Watchmen,
twist.
he's kind of like, aside from Dr. Manhattan, who is kind of the first real superpower in that world, kind of doesn't make sense to have, like, you know, the comedian who he threw out of a building and splattered to his death. Suddenly he's alive and kicking it, and now over in the DC universe. Not sure I understand how that works in terms of the timeline, if he was plucked from the second before he died. Because, in my opinion, that kind of changes the reality of the world of Watchmen. So
But I think that's the whole point of this, is like, Dr. Manhattan is clearly being made out to be the overarching, you know, I'll say villain entity that caused the post-Flashpoint New 52 and current Rebirth state that we're dealing with.
Thanks, Alan.
Which means he had godlike powers, right? So time and space were...
Oh, he was definitely able to make people explode into squishy bits.
So he's able to do, like, anything he wants. He can see different points in his own timeline and everything.
True.
So, I think this is just the power set wasn't defined in the Watchmen because it didn't need to be. It wasn't part of that core story. So now they're taking that and saying, okay, well, if he's able to do all of these things where he can see what happens in the future, but he can't see past a certain point because of some cataclysmic event, then maybe he can interact with events in the past at the very least.
I get what you're saying.
And that one issue, I will say, that one issue of Watchmen where it's just centric on Dr. Manhattan is, I think, outside of the Rorschach one, by far the best issue of the entire series. Dr. Manhattan. I think Dr. Manhattan is a fantastic character. I loved that one issue is what really hooked me on the rest.
It's
of
a very intriguing character, but I still don't get how they're kind of lining him up to face off against the Man of Steel. Like, it doesn't seem like it's a contest, like, at all.
No, it's a bird fighting a worm. It's not fair in the very least. Like, he's got these
super powered worm with the powers of 1,000 suns and can outrun a locomotive, or, you know, the old saying.
Yeah, he can change anything into his, you know, into his winning factor. So it's going to be a battle of wits, not a battle of might.
That's true.
Which is the way it's going to come down, which is another thing I'm really looking forward to, because that was one of the greatest things I liked about All-Star Superman when Morrison wrote it. It wasn't just about him flying around being like the strong man.
Let's punch
it was
things.
Him being the scientist, him being the thinker. He's far too often portrayed as the dummy in comparison to other members of the Justice League.
Thank you, Frank Miller.
But he's still super, super smart. And I don't mean that glib and as a pun. I mean, he's extremely intelligent beyond just super.
No, I forget. There was a recent, it's probably 10 years ago now, I think it was when Jeff Johns took over the Superman book, Action Comics. I think that they reestablished the fact that he was super intelligent. Like, it's not just like you said, the strong man flying around and saving the day. He actually is one of the smartest people in the DC universe. So it'll be interesting to see him face off against essentially the Watchmen's Superman.
Yeah.
I assume that it connects to the Superman theory, which I assume is something that has filtered its way in from Watchmen and is appearing in Doomsday Clock and various DC books right now.
As little hints, though, nothing is coming through on exactly what that is. And I think it's because they don't know yet.
The Russians did it.
The Russians did it. They still don't. They don't really know what that theory is because we're 6 issues in, and now this later half is completely changing from what the first half was.
I do hope this second half ramps up, like they're saying. I just this might work overall as a companion piece to Watchmen. It's something that I never felt needed a sequel. It didn't. It felt like it was a very much one and done story and has its place in the history of comics. Thanks, Dave Gibbons. I say that jokingly. I really enjoyed Watchmen, and I don't want to be that fanboy that's kind of like, oh, you can't touch it, it's sacred. I do think that it's fine to go and tell more stories where you think that there are more stories to tell. I personally haven't seen it yet with Doomsday Clock. I remain hopeful that it's going to come around as a complete piece once we hit issue 12. I find that there's a history of Jeff Johns overselling things and not quite living up to what he's promised. Green Lantern Rebirth is my go-to when I think about that, or Flash Rebirth. Like, it just... He never quite hits the mark. He's always enjoyable, but like he just misses the mark. And I hope that with this one, he does hit point.
I'm hoping that it isn't turned into pure canon in the rest of the DC universe. I think this story would work better if they still had the Elseworlds label. So hopefully in the future it gets.
Well, we're getting that sort of with Black Label.
Yeah.
So maybe, I don't know.
Maybe it'll get funneled in there. Hopefully they take bits and pieces, much like they have with things like Year One.
There's still a great mystery to be solved in this story, though.
There is.
When
which is what I'm looking
and how is Batman's costume changed again?
And see, that's the part I was like, I know at least there's going to be one thing that this guy likes, and it's going to be the little yellow symbol.
Yeah, I'm sold on that. Although I was not happy with how it was drawn in that issue.
No, where it bubbled out a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little strange. I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
What's his name? Who's the artist again?
Frank.
Gary Frank. That's it. Yeah, I was thinking Frank Quietly because of Jupiter's Legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Which, speaking of which, I think is our topic for HyperTiming this week.
Okay, so let's get into HyperTiming.
Yeah, HyperTiming, we're going to discuss Jupiter's Legacy and Jupiter's Legacy 2, written by Mark Millar and drawn by Frank Quietly.
Mm-hmm.
And Scott recommended this book to me. It was one that I somehow missed completely, just fell off my radar. But man, this book was awesome.
This is part of the Mark Millar's Miller World label type stuff, and this is also part of his quick renaissance, I think, in a lot of the books that he was doing around this time. He did a lot of really, really cool books that I want to talk more about in some of the other issues that we're going to do of the podcast. But this is one of those ones where it was like, okay, if we're going to read one early on in this, this is definitely the one I want to touch on. This is two Scottish boys doing fantastic work at the top of their game.
I can't believe how much I was into this book. Reading these two series like this last week, it threw off my pick of the week. Like I was really like absorbed into this world that Millar created here, and frankly, like none of the books this week compared to it. So it was hard to even make my pick. But
really and you had the benefit because I read this when it was coming out, so I had to deal with hiatuses. I had to deal with months or years in between volume 1 and volume 2.
And I think that would affect the enjoyment of the book, to be honest, because I found that the story, not a whole lot happens in each volume, issue 1 through 5 for each of them. It's very much a dissection of the story. You just get like a quick glance of this moment in time for the story. I think that issue 1 is a little more fleshed out, a little more world building than the second volume, which is normal. But it's very breakneck speed, like in terms of storytelling. Like it's like, here's the beginning and you race to the end and then to be continued in a sense. But when I say that, the story does conclude. There is like a finality to the storyline. But then you're left wanting more. And frankly, I look forward to Jupiter's Requiem, which is coming apparently in 2019. There's virtually no information about it online. I tried. I looked. I was hungry for it. But going back to Volume 1, the premise, and if you haven't read it, is basically... I think it's like 1920s, 1930s America. They've hit the Great Depression. They've lost everything when forgive me, what's the main guy's name? I don't want to use a superhero name just yet, and I just spoiled it. I can't remember his name, but the lead character, he's basically been given a vision that he's got to find this island in the middle of nowhere where literally captains of ships are saying there's nothing there, but he's certain, and his family and friends are fully behind him, and they believe that it's there. So they charter a ship and they find this mysterious island, and upon finding this island, they are granted superpowers. And so the superpowers apparently is what was in his vision. They were telling him that it was going to basically change the course of history and everything would be all right. The guy basically had lost his shirt in the Great Depression. So when they come back, it kind of jumps forward to modern times, where now that the original superheroes, they have now all had children, and things have gone a little off the rails. So
yeah, and this is where it picks up kind of where other stories that always tell us the future pace of your children, everybody's glamming up and on Instagram, and everybody's trying to get sponsorship, and it's all about the fame and the popularity and everything like that. That's kind of a trope that's been used in a lot of different comics, and it plays out here, but I think it plays out here so much better than it played out in other places.
Well, it's very much of its time, or of the time he's trying to tell, and it's kind of like imagining that you've got the Hiltons who have like created this dynasty. They've created this huge business, have made, they're self-made people, I presume, but they grow their fortune, and you would expect that the next generation would carry that legacy on, and then they end up doing the simple life and releasing sex tapes and partying hard because they're end up being spoiled brats,
which is all the same stuff that these people end up doing in the comics. They all get their addictions, and they get their the sad emo superhero kid type stuff all starts to happen.
So the main guy, the Utopian, I believe is what he calls himself, he's kind of a proto Superman, Captain America type character. His wife is kind of like Lois Lane if she had superpowers. Kind of mixed in with like Lady Liberty and that kind of. I think actually her name is Lady Liberty, is her superhero name. He also has his brother Walter, who is kind of like the. I wouldn't say Martian Manhunter character. He's kind of the super intelligent psychic character who's can't. I would relate him to like Scar from like the Lion King. Like he's kind of like the younger brother who doesn't quite live up to, can't match the older brother, fist to fist. He's got but he feels that he's intellectually superior.
Yeah, he's got the arrogance of a Lex Luthor. He's got the psychic powers of a Charles Xavier.
Yeah,
and he's got
exactly, you nailed it.
He's like merging those together, and what happens if somebody doesn't necessarily have the same altruistic motives.
And so like I think that the Utopian has led the world of heroes, because at this point like powers have expanded to like hundreds of people apparently at this point. Some are children, some are I guess other people who are endowed with abilities, but it brought on the golden age of heroes, and they kind of got in costume, fight crime, help your everyman. Where Walter, I don't know if he even got a code name at any point in there, but
I don't remember that being said.
he decides that he kind of wants to step in because he's seeing the economic decline of 2008. I think it is roughly what it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And he's thinking, well, we have powers. We should be able to step in and take charge. Where Utopian's like, no, man, like we gotta keep the balance going. We're not here to rule. We're here to kind of help.
Right. It's the old dichotomy of we have the superpowers and we can change things for the better. So why aren't we just controlling this and changing them for the better, as opposed to, no, we're here to help them find their way. We're to quote Superman in JLA, when that first story arc ended, we're here to catch them when they fall. It's not about taking over. We're not that. Walter sees it very, very differently.
Very much so. And so Walter, seeing an opportunity to manipulate the Utopian son, Brandon, first of all, actually, before I go into that, I should say the Utopian has two kids. He has Brandon, who's kind of this like emo, kind of almost deadbeat, doesn't really want to do what his dad's doing. He's kind of just likes to party and booze.
Goes out, he tries to help people, but he's drunk and misguided, so he never ends up doing it right. Like at one point they're saving an oil tanker or something, like that, a shipping tanker that's gonna fall.
No, they actually were trying to help him get there faster, so they lifted it out of the ocean, and because they're drunk and misguided, as you said, like kind of fuck it up.
Yeah, they don't know what the hell they're doing, so all of a sudden these containers are falling off, and Dad's gotta swoop in and fix the boy's mistakes.
Essentially verbally spanks him in front of everybody.
Yeah.
And then you've got Chloe, the daughter, who she's your kind of Paris Hilton prototype. Like,
mm-hmm.
She's not necessarily bad per se. Like, she's just trying to like make a buck while she's like, and get popular, Instagram and
mm-hmm.
Twitter and all that stuff while she gets sponsorships, and she's like endorsing random products and things like that as her superhero character. But to get back on point, Walter sees an opportunity. He no longer wants to live the life of just the caretaker. He wants to actually take over because he thinks his vision is right. So he manipulates the Utopian's son, who's kind of got kind of a hole in his heart kind of thing. He feels like a disappointment to his father.
He's got
and
daddy issues. He's
basically
daddy issues.
And so apparently not just
sad emo daddy issues.
Yeah, apparently Brandon's not the only one that feels this like this kind of like they feel like they should do more, so they decide that they basically have a massive mutiny and take out the Utopian and his wife. They do attempt to take out Chloe, who I think we forgot to talk about in the regard that she earlier in the issue has a drug overdose from her partying ways. It was some kind of alien drug thing that nearly kills her. In the hospital, she wakes up and she finds out that she's pregnant. And I think she had a passing mention that she doesn't date superheroes, that she dates only like kind of, I forget how she referred to him, but it was basically saying kind of like a non-powered loser type or whatever, which would be Hutchins, who I think it was Hutchins. Was his name Hutch or Hutchins?
Honestly, I read it when it came out, and I forget some of their names.
Yeah, I think he's Hutchins, and he's later revealed to be her boyfriend, who he is the child of Sky Fox, Skyrise. I can't remember the name, but he was another hero, George, who was in the original party to the quest that led to them getting powers. He is born without powers. He's kind of like the bastard child of this guy who later became, quote, a super villain. So Chloe finds out that they're pregnant, and this kind of alters her kind of way of thinking, as it's a whole new responsibility that she never really understood or really desired in her life. So basically what happens is the mutiny happens, and Brandon, being controlled by Walter, essentially take out Utopian pretty brutally, I might add. Like, heat visions his face off. Like, it's...
Yes, when he takes out his dad, he takes out his dad, just melts everything off of his face and just kills him.
Just all his rage in one kind of blast.
And they flash back to one of the earlier fights in I think issue number 1, where the superheroes are actually fighting this really strong villain, and Walter uses his power of trapping a villain inside his mind.
Yeah,
and I think
that was pretty
quietly,
awesome.
like, really shows his artistic muscles, because he takes it from a sketch panel and then starts adding in more and more detail, and the colors come in and everything like that as you're focusing more. And it probably doesn't make sense as I'm describing it, a visual thing on the podcast, but it's if you haven't read it, pick it up and check it out. The way he laid out this panel is really cool.
It's gorgeous.
And they use this power. This method comes back a couple different times throughout the entire story, but they use this same technique of trapping him inside his head so he thinks something else is going on.
It was a painting from his childhood of like a serene moment, which he was mentally painting in his mind. But I think that comes back into play in volume 2, where we're going. So yeah, so the Utopian and his wife are brutally taken out. Brandon and Walter basically march into the White House and take over the United States of America. Chloe, with her boyfriend Hutchins, forgive me if that's the wrong name, but I believe it is. He's powerless, but he does have a device that his father gave him. It's kind of like a flashlight with some, I think it was like tinfoil and some other thing that he threw together because his dad was a genius inventor. And this device is like a power rod. It kind of like, he says a command and it basically does it.
Anywhere he wants to go, it'll take him.
Which I believe there was a part where it shows that he was kind of ruthless with it at the beginning, and then he finds out he's going to be a father. And during this whole coup d'état where Brandon and his legion of heroes are taking over, they've come after Chloe as well. So Hutchins and Chloe take off. And they are just like hopping everywhere because heroes are everywhere all over the earth. They're like finding them right away till eventually I think they land in the middle of a hurricane somewhere in like Vietnam or something like that, and they can't. They manage to escape. The series then cuts ahead to years later, and Chloe and Hutchins have been living a quiet life without any abilities. They've given birth to a son named Jason, who does have powers, and he is an interesting combination of powers because I think he's a mix of Utopian and Sky. What's his name again?
Sky Fox?
Was it Sky Fox? I can't remember.
Something Fox.
I'll just call him George for now. George Hutchins' father. And he basically grows up hearing the stories of Utopian and his grandmother from Chloe. And, you know, that inspires him that he wants to kind of bring back the golden age of heroes. And while they're in hiding, it's not very conducive because this kind of exposes them a little bit, because he would take on his little homemade costume and go and save the day.
Yeah, use his super speed to go out and do all the superboying, basically.
Basically.
Go out and save whoever he can. Because, we'll jump back 1 second, once they took over, they had their little coup and they took over, they've made other heroes illegal unless they are part of their group.
Sanctioned, yeah.
So you've basically got the kind of Civil War aspect. Big surprise.
Yeah.
The Civil War aspect of factions of heroes, and some of them are good and some of them are bad. So you've got you've got them in hiding so that they don't get captured. Yeah. And every time the son goes and does what he rightfully should be doing, as far as his grandfather would even have been concerned, he's risking exposing them. And that is when shit goes sideways.
Yeah, so Brandon and Walter realize that Chloe, being out in the world, who also has Utopian-like powers, your proto-Superman, super strength, super speed. I think she's got like energy concussive powers as well. Like, she's pretty like off the charts powerful, which is pretty cool. And you see that she's changed also at this point. Both the parents are now kind of, they believe in doing the right thing, but they also believe that they want to protect their family. So naturally, they decide they've got to assemble Hutchins' old friends from the supervillain side of powered individuals, and they've got to basically put the band together to kind of take on the United States. And pretty much ends. The first volume kind of ends with them pretty much being found out. So that's why they kind of throw everything together, and that leads into Jupiter's Legacy 2. Which is a faster paced story. It's very. I'll just go into it briefly, but they basically assemble a team of 12 or 14 ex-villains under the nose of Brandon and Walter, who are trying to find them. Basically, they end up the son, who's also a genius. He sort of has the powers of his grandfather George, and Utopian. So he's kind of like a crazy, super powerful little Superboy, super intelligent, and he actually created a machine that helps locate the meta-humans or superpowered people, and finds George, who everyone previously thought was dead. And he's like, they find him in Russia, and he's hiding out, and he's just kind of embittered because he was never truly a supervillain. He tried to make change in ways that wasn't taking over, but he was trying to kind of, expose the banking system and trying to like kind of empower the little guy instead of, I think they had a pretty good line about the heroes, we got to enforce, not just like inspect the alleyways, but the boardrooms as well. And so he's reluctant, and the little Jason gives him a little guilt trip about being like a deadbeat dad, basically. So he kicks them out, and they go. Without them licking their wounds. Hutchins is kind of devastated by the fact that his dad didn't want to help him, and he's never asked him for anything.
Yeah, his dad's still alive, and his dad won't help him.
So he it basically ends up where I think Brandon and his team. First of all, like it showed hinted at the world at large, where they are in like these trade agreements with like China and whatnot, and Brandon's just ruthless. He just wants to just go and take over everything. Walter kind of wants to take the more calculated approach through agreements. And then after having changed religious buildings into education centers, a radicalized Christian basically uses a dirty bomb, strapped himself, and like wipes out 15 miles, killing everyone. So Brandon naturally says, I'm taking over China then. So he rushes off and conquers China in like 5 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, surprise, surprise. Going the route that they went down, things aren't any better.
No.
They've actually made things worse, that you can't rule by an iron fist. For some reason, people don't like when you do that.
Yeah.
So
you can take it from here.
Yeah, so the end of it basically just goes through that storyline of now the family fighting with the brother and trying to wrestle back power, and it turns into a bit of a revenge story.
Yes. Just
getting revenge and to try and equalize the planet again.
George does return. He does feel the guilt because he does actually, in fact, love his son.
Dad does come back. Dad doesn't come back for long, but he does come back.
There's like a series of psychic battles with Walter and that character called Repo, who has the ability to. He's kind of like the rogue of the.
More like a mimic, where if he's in proximity enough to somebody, he can take over some of their powers.
And so it's like this like battle of the minds, and it's like they're putting each other in their different psychic paintings or whatever, and like Walter ultimately takes down Repo, doesn't kill him, but is able to outmatch him because he's the source, the original powers.
Yeah. Some really creative uses of that cosmic flashlight.
Yeah. He's like, so Hutchins is about to be killed. He's like there's no one to defend him. Chloe's been like pummeled by hundreds of other characters, including her brother Brandon. Jason's in the Supermax trying to rescue more prisoners to help build their army. George was brutally like you think he's coming in to save the day and kick the crap out of Walter, and then Walter just literally scorches him with his mind, burns his body inside out. So Hutchins is is cornered. He's about to get crushed, and Hutchins grabs. I think he just goes inside Walter's head, and the cosmic rod thing just appears inside Walter's head, killing him clearly
instantly. And it was another
brilliant.
One of these moments where you're just like, oh, holy shit! Like you never think about heroes doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But obviously, he wouldn't. He's a villain, so yeah.
It was a pretty awesome fucking scene. Like There's like tons of these little shocking moments, and I think that I'm not doing it justice at all describing it to you guys, but this series is something you got to check out.
A lot of it is written, and a lot of the story comes through just in the panel work.
Quietly, I've never been a huge Frank Quietly fan, but his art is just on point with this series. Like it's finally a story I find that fully suits his abilities.
Yeah, there's pages where there is no dialogue, there is no writing whatsoever within any of the panels, and it's just the progression of the artwork getting through. And I mean, he puts his splash pages when they come together. There's scenes of heroes fighting, and they're tearing through buildings, going into different layers of the Earth's crust and things like that. And brilliant. It's just amazing seeing all of the detail that he puts into these things. It's clear why he can't be on a monthly book.
Yeah, I forgive him for all the delays with other series at this point, just for this. Like I said, I don't do this series justice in my description to you. It's a lot to take in, but it's very quick and very to the point. But there's a lot of social commentary that's not beating you over the head with it, and it's just like little nuances in it that are just brilliant. And Mark Millar, I've always hit or miss for me, but he nails it with this series, and I look forward to the movie that they're talking about, and of course Jupiter's Requiem.
Yeah, I mean it's one of his books where he is known as a hyper violent writer, but this isn't the same gratuitous hyper violence that he's had in his other books.
For sure, and it's there, but it's not the focus. It's not it's raw enough that it pulls you in and it gives you genuinely shocking moments. But man, I can't recommend this book enough. I'm so glad that you recommended it to me.
I'm so happy to hear that. It was one of my favorite books when it was coming out, and it was painful to wait for the other subsequent.
I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine, because each read is very quick. So it's oh man, I gotta wait.
Yeah, it was really good. I'm really glad that you enjoyed that one. Hopefully everybody else checks it out. If you've picked out on any issues with naming, or you want to yell at us about what some of the characters' names really were, you can drop us a line at the Terminal Velocity Podcast at gmail.com, and by all means correct us.
Yeah,
we're running off the top of our heads here on what we can remember, and we've read a lot this week. So
now, before we go on to the next part, which will be the pick of the week, we actually didn't mention this at the beginning of the episode, but we are gonna have a giveaway related to running the Cosmic Treadmill this week. Issue number 1 of Jupiter's Legacy. Jupiter's Legacy 2, number 1, second printing. All you got to do is basically tweet at us at Comics Terminal with the hashtag Terminal Velocity Podcast, and just tell us what you think about the show, about Jupiter's Legacy, any of that. But just drop us a line, and we'll pick the first person who does that.
Random. Oh. First person or
yeah,
random?
I think, maybe random. We'll see the response.
Maybe it's one. Maybe it's random.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
But
your odds can change.
we'll send it to you at no charge to you. So please do. That's at Comics Terminal and the hashtag Terminal Velocity Podcast.
Okay. So now we're going to get into running the Cosmic Treadmill. This one is going to be probably a slightly more condensed conversation than we had last week about on the Cosmic Treadmill. We're going to talk about Spider-Man One More Day, more specifically about how it's relating to the current Spencer run on Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah. Not a fan of One More Day. Just time-wise, we're going to keep it brief.
She's been desperate to rant about this.
But there's no need to wipe out the marriage. Brand New Day, which followed, just led into stories about Peter having sex with other women, and that there was no other stories there that they told that couldn't have had the Spider marriage. And how they did it kind of taints the character Spider-Man, which I think Nick Spencer is kind of slowly working to undoing. You have Spider-Man make a deal with the devil, it's really fucking lame.
Yeah, so it was the idea that, okay, what can we do with Spider-Man? We have to get more people reading. Teenagers aren't going to want to read about a married spider dude. this is going to lose readership. What can we do to fix this?
Should have thought about that in '87.
This is a really weak way of getting past it, and I don't think it changes.
It's not even the first time they tried. Like, they tried killing her off. They tried
umpteen different things have come and gone for it, and you still didn't get the breadth of stories that I think they were hoping to get because they weren't together. I think the strength for somebody like that comes from having a character that they are invested in.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way, Superman really doesn't have the same strength behind him if Lois isn't there. Wally West, if he didn't have Linda, his lightning rod, he would be lost, as you can clearly
Reed and
see.
Sue Storm, Reed Richards, Sue Storm, or Sue Richards. Like, I just never bought that argument that they needed a single Spider-Man to tell Spider-Man stories. I'm like, to me, that tells me you need to change the whole editorial and writing team if that's the case, because there's plenty of stories you can tell about a married character that can relate to anybody of any status, whether it's looking at themselves or relate to it through their parents or through their grandparents. Like, there's no reason that they should have taken that element away from Peter Parker.
No,
he was a guy, the nerd in school. He was tormented and bullied, and he elevated himself to a point that he gets the hot girl. He who not just is not just the hot girl, but she's also like an equal partner to him. Like, she kind of keeps him balanced. Like, if you notice the stories where Spider-Man kind of focused solely on being Spider-Man, it kind of goes off rails for him. She's kind of, like you said, his lightning rod, and I felt that is something that's been sorely missing from Spider-Man comics for the last 10 years.
There's ways to tell stories about characters where it's just about who they are, and it doesn't matter that they're married or in relationships with that. So having them have to do this whole twist to just get rid of that, it was. And then you
take your cleanest superhero, basically, the one you're selling to kids, like your biggest everyman comic, and you have them make a deal with the devil, like I said, like the Mephisto. Sorry, one of the many devils that run around the Marvel universe. It's just like this taint that's been there for 10 years, and guess what, Marvel? No one's forgotten. Like, so I think Nick Spencer's on that track. I think he's looking to kind of correct that wrong, and maybe I'm wrong, but
I would say he definitely is. If you looked at, if you were on the internet on New Comic Day when Amazing Spider-Man #1 came out, all of the sites were flooded with at least 3 stories of, oh my god, they're getting rid of One More Day.
Yeah, like it's time. Comic fans never forget continuity. Sorry, guys. I think that's the way they're going. Like, they over in Ben Reilly Scarlet Spider, R.I.P. I think. But they've had a storyline with Mephisto making a deal with Ben there, and there's been consequences for breaking the deal. So now with Mary Jane and Peter kind of finding each other again, does this classify as them breaking the deal? Now, they don't have the memory of the deal as far as we know, but it can't be a coincidence that Mephisto's making deals with Parker's clone,
It might not be, and I mean, it's interesting that the other villain inside the Amazing Spider-Man stuff that's on the go right now is making deals with other villains, and then
taking them out
and we can only assume it all relates in some way, shape, or form. So it'll be really cool to see how that ties in, and if they really do just erase One More Day, and that means Aunt May dies.
Fine by me.
Or
hey, they did have a hint in the latest issue, number 5, I think it was, Amazing Spider-Man. They did kind of imply when it was the scene where she's giving him rent money, and she's talking about online poker, but she mentioned something about being old. Like, it was like a passing comment, and it was probably a joke, but I found it interesting that they were pointing out to you again that she's not kind of the hip middle-aged woman anymore. So kind of like leaning towards her being that elderly aunt again. So maybe I'm grasping at straws here, but I feel like that might be implication that they're kind of going in that direction.
I think you and every other Spider-Man fan who was around before One More Day,
she's a feeble old lady,
now remembers her as feeble and old, and more importantly, just wants things set back.
Yeah,
because it's been a long slog up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'm really enjoying the new Amazing Spider-Man. One of the reasons I'm really enjoying it is because it is retrofitting that component in, because Parker Luck only works for so long, and like you can only have so many incendiary characters to him or secondary characters or whatever.
Yeah.
Before it's like, okay, he needs something that he can hold on to, that he's really fighting for, because just fighting for the memory of Uncle Ben when he's already met Uncle Ben a few times in the Spider-Verse, like it all kind of starts to fade a little bit.
Yeah. I think this might sound vicious, but I think it's kind of time for Aunt May to go. It's kind of like the Kents over in Superman. Like they were great while they were there, but like just in terms of progressing the character, like I think it's something that we all will face at some point with our parents, and I think it's that step, and I think it's good that Mary Jane is kind of in, and Spencer subtly cemented her in good. Like he has cemented her in the fact that he acknowledges that Mary Jane was written to whine about him being Spider-Man and wanting him to give it up. And in this story where he's split into two and she's realizing he's not whole without it, and it's part of what she loves about him is his dual identity. And so he's kind of like acknowledging that history, but saying, so what?
Yeah, he was very not so subtle in the, she did a lot of whining like this, but ultimately,
yeah,
they get back together.
Yeah.
So.
MJ is his lowest lane, right? And you can only ignore it for so long.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
So I think that's all I'm gonna say about that for now. I'm not gonna say we won't revisit this in a bigger Spider-Man category, because I probably have more thoughts on this.
Force us both to reread it and then really get mad.
But in terms of time, we should get to pick of the week. This week was a little tough for both of us.
That's an interesting.
It's not that it was a bad week, but it was kind of mediocre. I don't know. Like there were good stories, but nothing really popped off the pages for me this week. I think I'll go first this time.
Yeah, you go first this time.
I was down to 2 like last week. I did make a decision before the show, but I will briefly touch on the second choice because there's a relation. I'm going to have to say my number 1 pick this week is Fantastic Four number 2, Legacy 647. Written by Dan Slott, which just kills me to say that. And Sarah Pincelli?
Yeah.
Sorry for mispronouncing that. This has been a week of stories that kind of like set up a bigger story or bigger issue. And my second pick was going to be Superman number 3. And ultimately I couldn't go with it because it just wasn't that great. Like a lot of people online said it was Bendis bringing the A game, but I didn't see it. But it again also, yeah. But but I will say that I was liking that it's finally bringing that story to head, and I'm hoping that this will be the end of Rogalzar.
Okay, what story to head? This is the problem I have, is I don't know what the hell is happening in Superman. Action Comics, he's taken his A game to Action Comics. Fantastic since he's taken over. Superman, I have no idea what the hell is going on, and I don't give a damn about this Rogalzar, magic axe.
I'm excited for it because I think this is like gonna be where they put him back in the toy box, and we don't have to deal with him for a while.
The sooner he's gone, the better.
Because the miniseries was enough for me, and now he's kind of here. But that's like I said, like I didn't read a whole lot this week, but that's why it's number 2. Okay. Actually, you know what? No, you know what? I changed my mind. It's not number 2. It connects to my number 1 because of the whole setup part. I think Catwoman number 3 was my number 2.
Oh, I didn't
and it's a very slow burn story, but it's kind of like, and nothing has really happened yet, but it had kind of a reveal stinger again, setting up like a bigger issue. But we've gone off the rails here. Pick of the week was Fantastic Four number 2. And
before you get into your reasons why, I will also say that that's my pick of the week.
I had a feeling.
So that one is my pick of the week. Number 2 would have been Spider-Man. But yes, we can get into.
How did I forget Spider-Man was this week? That's because I read both issues 4 and 5 together. Yeah. Sorry, that shifts the chart a little again.
Again?
Yeah, sorry. So, Fantastic Four number 2, Amazing Spider-Man number 5, Catwoman 3, and Superman number 3. I digress. Fantastic Four number 2. We finally get Reed and Sue back, and we see kind of what they were up to. We did kind of talk about it briefly in the Franklin Richards story, but they're basically exploring the little universes that Franklin Richards has created as they go along, and you're seeing that the kids, the Fantastic Kids, have grown up a little bit, but they're not alone. They've also got a bit of the Future Foundation with them, which I didn't know.
I didn't know that they had stuck around with them, which is where I have a bit of a contention, because why would you take Leech and Marty and some of the
Molecule Man and Dragon Man and leave Johnny Storm and Ben Grimm behind?
The other two behind. It seems like a real dickhead move.
I'm not sure about that, and I've created the cardinal sin of not having read the Hickman run, but
you need to correct that.
Yeah, I will. But I really did enjoy finally having them back, and like I'm not going to get into too deep into the story, but the stinger at the end, there's this new all-powerful kind of entity that they're fighting, and I don't even know if they gave a name for it yet.
The Griever. She gave herself multiple names, but just the Griever is what they go with, who is basically has the opposite powers to Franklin's universe-creating powers.
She basically ends everything, comes to destroy and erase, basically.
So she can't do anything. She can't exist until his powers are gone.
Yeah, so it's noted that he has reached the end or his limit or maximum universes he can create, which he didn't know he had until that moment, which then the Griever comes on the scene and just wipes the floor with the Future Foundation, although she's like, I can't believe the Fantastic Four have been so easy to take out. Like, they've been legendary throughout the cosmos, and, Reed is like, lady, like, this isn't the Fantastic Four. This is the Future Foundation. You're fighting children.
Yeah.
So she's like, all right, fine. Drops this little machine down to Reed. She's like, fine, bring your team then.
Yeah.
And so he literally takes that opportunity to outsmart her and says, all right, I'll call the Fantastic Four. And he literally contacts... Sorry, issue 1 ended with like a little beacon in the sky, which you just thought was like a little four saying, hey, we're back. But it was actually Reed recruiting call to arms of anybody who's ever been a member of the Fantastic Four.
So you have the Hulks. And I say Hulks because a couple of them are there.
She-Hulk,
You've got Wolverine, you've got Ghost Rider, you've got
Spider-Man.
You've got the She-Hulk thing from
Nova, I think, is there too.
Yeah, you've got like
it's like a full
Spider-Man,
awesome splash page.
Everybody's there.
I don't get how Wolverine is there exactly.
He was part of the Fantastic Four.
No, I know he was in that but he's dead right now.
Well, right? He's back. It's kind of timelines.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe this takes place after the return of Wolverine. We'll see next issue, but it was awesome. She's like, what have you done? He's like, you said bring the Fantastic Four, and here we are.
This is my extended family.
Yeah.
And so that's the panel that actually got me at the end. I was like, okay,
that's where it sold me.
Yes, this is where I was on board. I was like, okay, fine, this will be my pick of the week. It wasn't paced quite right. I think the issue needs some pacing fixes.
Yeah, for sure.
I liked Valeria coming up to a Namor-esque type kid.
Yeah.
And slowly Reed Richards figures it out. And he's like, nope, we're out of here. We gotta go. I liked some of these components.
I like Franklin's kind of taking after his Uncle Johnny.
Yeah.
He's a little bit there. He's a little goofy, which is a good characterization for him.
Mm-hmm.
There is a moment where the kids mention about missing their uncles.
Yes.
So they weren't so far from their heart, and Franklin was trying to get Valeria to see if she can communicate with them.
Mm-hmm.
But man, that final page, and you got like every Fantastic Four member on that page. That was just,
it's awesome,
amazing.
Yeah,
like that's the kind of thing I want from this book, like where it's just like the world's greatest comic magazine. Like this is it. I will criticize the art. I like Sarah Pincelli's art. I don't know what she's doing with Reed's face. Like this little like pube beard thing that he's got going
an interesting
on.
Beard. His face is
elongated,
longer than I would have expected.
Especially when you look at the cover art, the artist, the way that he's drawn there, I'm like, that's an older kind of like Reed there. But like it's artistic choices. But Yeah, I have to say, like, we should work a little there to tweak that a little bit. But all the other characters are fine.
The style might grow on me, but his
It
definitely.
won't grow
I have
for
a
me.
feeling that it's supposed to be because he stretches and everything like that. Things are kind of.
I get it, but nah.
Not for you. So there we go. We actually agreed this week.
Yeah,
That's
it
interesting.
was a pretty good. Then like said, a tough week, but no, that was definitely the closest to a standout would be Fantastic Four number 2, Legacy
Definitely.
647.
Definitely. I do want to give a quick shout out to Journey into Mystery, The Birth of Krakoa.
Okay.
That comic that came out. It was actually, it was one of the ones that I was a little bit in contention for, only because it's kind of the old-time war story going to a crazy, scary island. It had some horror aspects to it.
Okay.
It was an interesting read. It wasn't as fun as the Fantastic Four ended up being, but it was pretty good. It's Dennis Hopeless. I'll completely destroy this name, so I apologize. Debril Morissette fan. Like I say, really old school Nick Fury and his Howling Commandos get stranded on this island. Some real weird body horror stuff starts to happen.
Interesting.
And Fury cracks a deal with Krakoa to help get them off the island and for the island to be left on its own. So
Okay.
really interesting. It was a fun little read, so I do want to throw that out as a nice little one shot to kind of pick up and read an old time comic.
Cool.
So that was the end of that. As always, you can find us at Comics Terminal on Twitter.
We're also on Facebook and Instagram at Terminal Velocity Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.terminalvelocitypodcast.com or .ca for our Canadian listeners. And I think that's, let us know what you think. Give it a shout out.
Send us an email if you've got any questions, any recommendations, any corrections that you want to fire off to us. So that email again is terminalvelocitypodcast@gmail.com.
And I know you guys are sad, but I don't think we're going to get to that why Iron Man is so popular this week.
Unfortunately, I don't get it, but we've run out of time.
Shucks.
We'll see you next issue.
Take care.